Everybody's looking at you, kid.
I'm Charles Foster Kane!
Hey, Stella!
Stuck on this.
What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. Today I am joined by director Jeremy Workman and editor Paul Murphy to discuss the upcoming release of their new film, Secret Mall Apartment, and aiding and abetting me in the task of holding their feet to the flames to answer some hard-hitting questions. We have Bill Scurry back on the show, and we've all hung up before in the flesh at Kevin Geeks Out. But this is the first time that the four of us have recorded together, so I'm very fired up to discuss the movie, which I've now seen twice. But the official premise of the film reads as follows: the amazing true story of 8 young Rhode Islanders who built and lived in a secret apartment inside a busy mall from 2003 to 2007, but without giving away any spoilers, that barely scratches the surface of this amazing movie. But with all that out of the way, let's just jump right into it. Paul and Bill have been on this channel several times before, but this is a first-time appearance for Jeremy Workman. So welcome to the show. Congratulations on the movie.
Thanks for having me. I mean, I'm a long-time wrong reel veteran.
Absolutely.
But
yeah, 1971, 1954,
Yes.
1982, and 1994 are episodes that will live in infamy. But the most important question I have for you today is, when can people see the movie? Where can they see the movie? Where's the best place to find info on upcoming screenings for Secret Mall Apartment?
Secret Mall Apartment is coming out in theaters. It is coming out in theaters in select cities. We're doing theaters first. You know, traditional, kind of old school. We are releasing in probably 100 cities.
Nice.
And the first city is Providence, Rhode Island, where it all takes place. And it also is playing at the actual mall where the secret apartment was in. And
were they able to convert that space into a small screening room just for VIP? Or
No, it's in the Cineplex at the Providence Place Mall, but then it's in a lot of major cities: Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York City, and just a lot of other big cities with a lot of Alamo draft houses. So we're doing a pretty robust theatrical release, and then we hope it'll eventually land in a great place for digital soon after. But right now our focus is very much like the theatrical. And I don't know if it's a documentary, right? So it is, it's sometimes challenging to get people to go to theaters for documentaries, but we're giving it a shot with this.
Unless they're directed by Jeremy Workman.
Yeah, because we think it's a good movie to see in a theater. So we're really, really pumped about doing that.
Well, just to totally sell that idea, I'm going to briefly play the trailer just so people have some idea of what we're discussing about and have some context for the conversation. So here's the trailer to Secret Mall Apartment.
This is an incredible tale. Artists set up an apartment inside Providence Place Mall, going undetected for years.
We all hated the mall when it went up, right? Nobody wanted that to happen.
Shortly after, a developer comes in and says, I'm going to knock down your home.
I just had this idea. Oh, we should live in the mall.
It seemed like a very absurd fantasy and perhaps a great challenge. When the mall was being built, I saw a space that I could not figure out what it would be used for. We went looking for that anomaly in the architecture, and we snuck ourselves in there, and we took out our flashlights. And there it was. It started the conversation immediately.
We need to develop this underutilized space.
There was a real necessity to build a wall there.
It was like 5,000 pounds of cinder blocks.
It's important to emphasize there's this underlying sense of dread that we're going to get caught at any time.
Wow. So what is it? Is it a prank? Is it a work of art? Is it a social experiment?
It was like this alternate universe that's within the real world.
It talks about gentrification, capitalism, everything being commodified.
The apartment was the side project to the other stuff.
We were like a little elite strike force team of empathetic artists.
Such a magic thing to take a space from the mall.
Holy smoke.
All right, fantastic.
Thanks.
Well, Paul, I know you're an equally adept editor as Jeremy Workman. Who deserves more credit for the final cut of that trailer, you or Jeremy?
Oh, I definitely don't deserve any credit because I had nothing to do with that trailer. I just enjoy watching it every time.
Fantastic.
For that trailer,
you did edit that. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty incredible. Because I've been a trailer editor also for many years. So I brought in like really, really talented, people with real crazy trailer credits. One person who was working on that trailer has done like Tarantino movies and Wes Anderson movies. Another person has done like, just some like really big Hollywood movies. And I brought them both on and they each did a version. And then we kind of mixed and matched and combined. And then I sort of took it to the finish line. We were working on the trailer for a year.
It's an awesome trailer. It gets the job done.
Yeah, for a year.
Well, I've read the, I guess, the official director's statement by Jeremy. So I know a little bit about the background about how you and Michael Townsend first met up. But if you don't mind repeating it, just for people out there who are like part of the uninitiated, how did you and Michael Townsend first meet? And how did you become aware of all this footage that you and Paul would have to start to sift through to figure out what's going on in the movie? What do you need to shoot? But just give us the origins of this incredible movie.
So first of all, I was in Greece. I was in Athens, Greece, which is like an unlikely place to, suddenly meet Michael Townsend, who's this artist out of Providence, Rhode Island. And I was out there filming for my previous documentary, Lily Topples the World. And Lily, that was the one about the domino toppler, the world's greatest domino toppler. And she's, has millions of followers on YouTube and, has become this sort of global sensation. So she was out in Greece doing a collaboration with Erno Rubik, the creator of the Rubik's Cube. And the building, they were in like this cultural building and it was covered in crazy, crazy tape art, masking tape art. And for those that have seen the movie, this is like a real, big part of Michael Townsend's art is he is the world's, most acclaimed. He's like the creator of this whole movement of masking tape art. And it was amazing. And I saw it and I sort of had to meet the person that did it. And then I discovered that he was an American and he was out there. And then we became friends and we would just like go hang out in Athens, Greece for a while, for like a few days because we were some of the only Americans there. And we were just going out drinking. And one night he sort of told me about this crazy, crazy story where in the early 2000s, he and 7 others snuck into the Providence Place Mall. They were mad about gentrification. They found this space that was about 1,000 square feet, and they decided to live in it, and they lived there for 4 years. And I mean, I thought he was like punking me. I thought it was all like, this was just him, trying to punk me, like we were drunk and it was like 2 a.m. And then he pulls out of his back pocket an iPad that was like cracked and broken and barely worked, but he was able to like connect to the cloud. And all of a sudden he started showing me footage of them like pushing up the couches up the ladder. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I mean, and he was just showing me footage that they had shot, which became the basis of the movie which Paul would end up cutting, probably a year after I met Michael. And
gotcha.
Yeah, I spent months trying to convince Michael and his group to let me make a documentary.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of documentary filmmakers would give their right arm just to have a project like this quite literally drop into their lap, almost like a lightning bolt out of the blue. But Paul, talk to me about your process of working with Jeremy, because obviously Jeremy is a very experienced editor. You're an experienced editor, and we've all hung out socially. And I remember, having a lot of fun, drunken conversations. But just talk about navigating through all this footage. What footage did you need to create, and what your job was like as an editor, just helping bring it all together?
So I was coming to New York for another project that I was working on at the time, And at that time, that was when Jeremy and I sort of met at his place. He showed me all of this amazing footage that, I couldn't believe was just sort of like, sitting away that nobody had sort of seen in 20 years or whatever. And he just sort of described to me the idea of, because both Jeremy and I were editing it together, but we kind of divided the story down the middle, where I was sort of focusing on the actual discovery of the space and moving into the space, and Jeremy was focusing in terms of editing on the other sort of peripheral parts of it, and just sort of showing me sort of all the different parts of the story that were there in the original footage. And that was like 2 days of doing it. And then basically I took that drive and went back to Australia, which is where I'm from, if you can't tell from the accent. And I reckon I spent a good first month just watching everything. And we talk about this as
like how much footage was there? Are we talking hundreds of hours or
No. It was 24 hours.
Okay.
And Jeremy's about to jump in and say that's not a lot for documentaries, which is true.
It's true.
Because I've cut documentaries that are 200 hours of footage. But probably the thing about this is this is 24 hours of footage that was shot by, young 20-somethings who weren't trying to make a documentary. They were just sort of archiving what they were doing that day. So sometimes you're just like, I remember getting up one day, putting on some footage, and I was just looking at a wall and I was like, why are they shooting a wall? What's going on here? And suddenly like a spitball hits the wall, and then like another spitball hits the wall. And it was just like 5 minutes of that. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to use this, but I feel like I need to watch this to find out. So it was a month of like watching all of the 24 hours of footage, which Jeremy had already sort of gone through and written notes about things that were standing out. And that sort of helped me, key into what the actual story was in the footage.
They had shot with this tiny camera. They bought a camera like at Radio Shack that was like $100, $129, and they gave it to all of them. Each had this camera, and the reason why they chose that camera was it was small and it fit in an Altoids case, and it shot 320 by 240, 10 frames a second. So that's smaller than this like my window here. And they shot 24 hours with it. And that's what they used for 4 years, filming with this tiny camera that fit in their palm of their hand. And they went all around the mall and all around this secret apartment, like filming everything and building, bringing them in furniture and building walls. And they just filmed it all. But as like Paul said, sometimes it was just like day to day, just hanging out, playing video games or, walking around.
So, Bill, I'm going to let you dive in here a second. But I've got one last question for Jeremy before I pass the baton. As you're watching this material and you're thinking about what you need to shoot and how are you going to flesh out the stories around, did you know this was going to be a big comprehensive endeavor? Like, at what point do you realize, all right, I've got all this amazing footage, but I probably need to shoot a film around it as well to kind of fill in the gaps? Because I love the way you're able to flesh out the backstories, where they are. And of course, being a Jeremy Workman movie, you built a big, giant, full-scale model, and then you did a recreation of the apartment. It reminded me quite a bit of The World Before Your Feet in that respect. But when you first got exposed to this concept, how quickly did it take you to kind of have a concept of what the overall movie's structure would be?
I mean, this was different from other movies that I had made, because the other movies were like, they're like ride-alongs. They're observational documentaries, or, what we would call a verite documentary. You're following along a subject, and I was following along, like, mentioning Lily, I was going wherever she was. She was in Athens, Greece. I'm filming her with a camera. Well, this was totally different. This was more almost like an archival movie. It was because there was all this footage that they had shot. So then we devised this plan to like shoot just a ton of interviews. And we shot 30 interviews to kind of build, to tell that story and to kind of look at it and drill into it. But because this was also this sort of bonkers story of like art, and it was meta, and it was, it was kind of self-reflexive, and it was playful and stupid and ridiculous. It also sort of enabled us just to do like, okay, let's do all kinds of crazy stuff in the filmmaking, and just kind of like embrace the fact that the movies, the movie of this should also be a little bonkers. It should also be a little out there. So that I think that plan was like from the get-go.
Gotcha. Well, it's always awkward praising a friend when they've made something good, but I've seen, I think, 4 or 5 of your movies now. I think it's your best movie yet.
Yeah,
but
really?
Or you have to get embarrassed. Bill, the floor is yours. What do you got for these guys?
You know, Jeremy, your IMDb write-up, which I'm sure you wrote yourself or somebody very close to you wrote, said that you were, as a filmmaker, that you're attracted to eccentrics, sort of the subjects that you go to are these people that make good copy for films. And again, having seen 4 of your docs, one of them was the decision day, the voting one.
Deciding vote, yeah.
Deciding vote. But then the 3 other sort of verite movies that you've made. I don't think eccentrics is what I would call these people. You know, when I was sitting down to watch the movie this weekend, I got this really comfortable feeling. You know, this is a milieu, much like the Marvel universe. I kind of feel like this is the Workman universe, where these people exist in a continuity, whether it's Matt Green or Lily Helvish or Michael Townsend. These are very decent people. These are people who kind of like unconnected to one another found I'm not trying to gaunt it up so much, but they kind of each find a moral clarity. There's sort of an adultness, a maturity, and a real sense of care, a real sense of like stewarding friends and an environment. And I love the fact that your movies continue to pick up on this theme, and you somehow find these people. That's why I think eccentrics isn't correct. But what was the vibe? It's like finding a guy like Michael Townsend. Excuse me. He's a humanitarian. He's an artist. He's sort of a quasi therapist. He's sort of a guru, and on top of that, the guy is a RISD teacher. There's just so different hats that he wears. It's like, how long before you knew that this man was going to fit alongside Lily and Matt in terms of the kind of person that you vibe with, that I could live with this for a few years and feel very good about spending a lot of time with and just around the environment of a Townsend?
I think that my own interest is going to lie in characters that are like really passionate about what they do. And I think that's probably the through line, is that like they're all about people that are just like so passionate about what they do. They don't care. Many of them don't care about money. They don't care about fame or notoriety. And Michael Townsend was the same way. I mean, he did, so for the viewers, like they do this secret apartment, which is, you hear it and it's like this incredible like prank. You're just like, oh my God, this sounds like it sounds like Jackass or something, like this like crazy prank. But then the movie starts kind of like, unspooling, and you start realizing that Michael, the ringleader, is this incredibly interesting person who's, while they were in the secret apartment, doing the secret apartment, they're also doing all this sort of kind of like volunteer charitable artwork. They're going into hospitals, into children's cancer wards, and they're doing art for no money, or they're doing these massive memorials for 9/11. And I think I'm always attracted to characters that are passionate and I think that's really interesting to watch on screen. And I think that's really exciting to watch on screen. And I think that too often, that's something that gets kind of that ends up not being a focus for a lot of characters that are on screen. And I just think that watching people with passion is something that makes me interested. And I think it probably also, connects the dots with me as a filmmaker in terms of what my own obsessions and getting into characters and what I aspire to be as well, So I don't know. I guess that's maybe some sort of answer to that.
I could never see you making like a Dr. Death type movie, like a movie about somebody who is interesting and is passionate, but isn't really subscribed to your sense of humanity. I think that would be so far out of the gamut that that's not necessarily something either you'd want to tell or be able to find the story. That's why these people sit as a set to me that make perfect sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think definitely. And I'm not really interested in political stuff, though I did make Deciding Vote, which was about the abortion vote in 1970. And I don't really lean towards like social issue movies, but I tend to really connect with like these people that are quote unquote ordinary that are doing extraordinary things.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like always what I'm interested in. And it's like, to be honest with you, it's what I've been interested in since I was like 15 years old. I mean, you always hear about like whatever the filmmakers who are running around making their Super 8 horror movies when they were 15. I was running around making like my Super 8 documentaries about like the homeless woman that was living on my street, So it's just pretty much only what I've always been interested in.
A question for Paul. As soon as I saw the movie, I guess a year ago at this clandestine IFC Center screening, I sent you and Jeremy this email ranting and raving about my my reaction to the movie. But what has stuck with me and hit me again for watching it the other day, when you get older, it's easy for your mind to get very made up about certain topics. And for me, when it comes to art, I'm always thinking, all right, well, cathedrals stay on a hill for 800 years, or the Blu-rays on my shelf remain there enshrined forever, but art is very permanent. But one of the most eerie parts of the movie, and I suspect you might have had a hand in editing it since it's from 1999, the sequence about the tunnel under the railroad track with all the disembodied kind of floating bodies and whatnot, is some of the eeriest stuff I've ever seen, but it's also incredibly beautiful, this idea that art doesn't need a signature and it doesn't need to last, but can still have enormous impact on people's lives. So am I over-reading into things? Am I full of BS? Or is this something that was really driving you, this idea of kind of to help people understand a different perspective about what is the role of art in people's lives?
So that was actually Jeremy's scene. I almost feel like that may have been cut before I even started, or a version of it was cut before I even started. But I think, like, to the bigger question of, like, was that something that we were interested in the editing of the film? It definitely was, but it wasn't like a topic that we brought to the film. If you watch this footage, if you watch these 24 hours of them in the mall space, back in their 20s, they're having this conversation every day of like, why are we doing this? What is art? What is the purpose of art? What is the meaning of me doing something like this? These guys in their 20s are talking about that every day. And that was like one of the most interesting things for me. Everybody gets the ability to sit down and watch the sort of compressed, trimmed down version of this film that's very digestible in 90 minutes. I think like one of the most exciting parts for me as an editor was I was able to be a fly on the wall and watch that entire 24 hours of like, oh my God, like these guys take this very seriously and they're just sitting around talking about it every day. And it made me think about like the things that I was doing and things like that as well. So yeah, it wasn't something that we brought to the film. It was there in the DNA from the beginning.
Gotcha.
I mean, it's so crazy. It's like there's these 8, young, punks, and they're sneaking into a mall. I mean, it's ridiculous. They're sneaking into a mall and they're secretly living in there and bringing in furniture and TVs and PlayStations. But it's like it's imbued with like all this like meaning and purpose and passion. And I think that's what's so neat about it. When Paul and I would discuss it, it would always sort of like shapeshift for us. We'd be like, oh, it was, the secret apartment's this prank. And it's like, oh, no, it's not. It's not a prank. It's this deep, place of art. And then we'd be like, no, it's not. It's them pretending that it's this place of art. And it's really this kind of meta, like set a stage where they're pretending that. And then it would switch again on us. So it was always kind of right when we thought we had a handle on it, it was like switching again. And I think that was like really fun for us to kind of play with.
Do you want to talk about that scene as well?
Which scene?
The sewer scene, the art installation.
Yeah, so the scene that James was talking about is the artist, Michael Townsend. He also, like, it's discovered about, 15, 20 minutes in the movie that he also, like, years before The Secret Apartment, he did this artwork under the sewers of Providence that, like, he didn't advertise. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't make public. And he put in these, like, mannequins and these bodies, like, dangling from the sewers, and he just left it there, and whoever saw it. And then it was eventually discovered and they destroyed it, and that was it. But for some people who did see it, it's like the most kind of haunting and impactful art they had ever seen. So like in some ways it has this like real connection to The Secret Apartment, which is like this thing that they were doing like sort of without people knowing, but that has kind of deeper meaning for everybody.
It reminded me of being a kid when you would hear a rumor about a skateboard ramp out in the woods.
Yeah.
And like, who knows how to get there?
Yeah.
Who knows how to find it? And you'd get lost looking for it.
People didn't know how to find it.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeremy, I think that I went in cold. I didn't watch the trailer. I even though it has been available through back channels through friends, I knew this was out there. I was waiting to mooch this link, which finally came in preparation for this. And so I didn't want to know anything. I really wanted to just go in and again find where the folds and the crenulations of your brain began and re-enter this world. And I think from the jump, realizing that these were RISD people, it's like, I think if you're from the East Coast, like most of us are, or well, I guess half of us are.
East Coast of Australia as well.
East Coast of Australia. You've met some RISD people, and you kind of know the RISD
Sure.
style and the RISD deal. And so to figure out that these people came out of that RISD system, and the précis of setting up the Fort Thunder, the sort of communal hang. It's so important I think for me, it furnishes a lot of meaning for the rest of the film. It explains a lot, but it also has this continuity with all the squats, all the sort of crust punk squats and places. In Copenhagen, there's a place called Freetown called Christiania.
I've been there.
Yeah, exactly. Me and my wife went there. She bought some hash there and smoked it with some kids while wearing hoods. And it's essentially this, squatters occupied it in the 1970s. They sat on it and essentially turned it into
There's a sign that says you are now leaving the European Union and entering Christiania.
Yeah. Wow. It's wild. And it is public land that has been continuously squatted on for about 55 years now. And, the Danes are so mild about it that they essentially they allow this thing to still keep using up prime real estate. However, it looks exactly like Fort Thunder did. And the premise of taking over this abandoned mill space, and Providence is one of those, like you say in the movie, it is one of these classic dispossessed post-industrial towns that just foundered after the 1950s, maybe even before the 1950s. And the sense of community about what these kids were doing, they were banging on these hardcore, bands inside that squat. And when you lose it, it's more than just removing a teeth from the landscape of Providence. Seeing these people, make a mall apartment, there's so many questions about, well, why are they doing this? But I can see that they're scrambling to offer some meaning. They're trying to recreate that third space, not just a living space, not just a dorm, not just a classroom, but some sort of combination of all of the above. And that's the gestalt of all these people putting their brains together, Michael Townsend, maybe the engine. But yeah, I mean, I guess you did have a lot of questions, or at least you had a big plate, a responsibility of how do you tell this story in such a linear order where you do lay these things out, because there is so much firmament for their decision that kind of, clarifies things for me at least.
And it's so satisfying when you realize that the mall's being designed in a way where there are no entrance ways to the mall from the people who are going to be most directly impacted by the arrival of it. And it's just their way of carving a little piece out of it and taking it back. And it's the ultimate go fuck yourselves. We're staying. And so, it's very emotionally satisfying as you watch it.
Yeah, I was really taken by that. Fort Thunder was this collective that that kind of came in the early 90s and through the 90s in Providence. And it was like mostly through this band, Lightning Bolt, which is this hardcore band. And a lot of the people that are connected as sort of adjacent to the Secret Mall apartment are also affiliated a little bit with Fort Thunder. And they lived at Fort Thunder. They were artists that went through Fort Thunder. So Fort Thunder was demolished. It was destroyed by the city of Providence. They just were they went in. It was in one of those mill districts, the way that a lot of artists live in the poorer areas. They demolished Fort Thunder. All these guys are super pissed. And they decide that they have to do something to take a stand. And it was also remarkable because kind of like the footage inside the secret apartment, these people had filmed incredible footage of them at Fort Thunder. And a lot of that was from this one artist, filmmaker, Raphael Lyon. And he had filmed all this footage where you see developers coming into the place and sizing it up and figuring out how they were going to demolish it and gentrify it and turn it into condos. And then these guys are like, screw that. And they're like, we got to do something. So their weird act of defiance was to go into the mall and build this secret apartment. And, was it an act of defiance? I don't even know. It's like, if nobody really knows what you're doing, does that make it, it wasn't really public when they did it. So it just had a lot of like contradictions and interesting aspects to it.
And even the crew itself that was participating, even they had different ideas about it. I mean, at a certain point, Mike's girlfriend's like, well, I want to buy furniture for an actual home that I might want to live in for a long time, as opposed to always trying to find furniture to invest in the secret mall apartment. And so it's interesting seeing the kind of the ebb and flow of the motivation behind the secret mall apartment and what purpose it ultimately serves.
Totally. Like part of them filming all that footage, they're also filming like these intimate moments. Like, there's this breakup that happens between Michael Townsend and his wife, and it's all captured on screen. Paul, you could talk about that. That was this incredible scene that Paul had cut that sort of takes place at the food court and kind of serves as a little bit of a climax.
Yeah, that was man, that was interesting. That was like a fight between the two of them that basically was captured on camera, and it was like, I feel like it went over like an hour and a half, and the camera keeps going on and in the mall. So they're just sort of walking around the mall, and I remember Mike just says something about the apartment, and you can just see that it sort of sets off Adriana. And it just starts to unravel as they're walking around the mall more and more. They're talking about their plans for what they want to do in the room and, what they want to put in there. And I think we ended up cutting this out, right? But like they were talking about how they wanted to start growing food in there and having like a closed loop so they would work at the mall and then go home to their apartment in the mall. But yeah, basically it starts to break down that she wants to focus on their home life and getting furniture for their home, whereas he feels like his home, like his sort of home inside, is more in that space there. But yeah, that was a fun one to cut down.
You know what we did that this is really interesting. What Paul and I did is we separated the movie, right, and we sort of siloed each other so that we didn't know always what the other was doing. And he was editing these scenes with all that old footage of them like going into the mall, sneaking in, building the apartment, building the wall, cinder blocks, all this like super fun, heisty, Ocean's 11, stylized like action scenes. And I was siloed, literally like thousands and thousands of miles away, just literally working on scenes like that were about like deep stuff about like art and purpose and charity and humanity. So it created this kind of workflow for Paul and I where we each were like in our own lane, doing our own like as best as we could and creating like these different modes of what this movie was. And what it did is it kind of created this like dichotomy where like the movie like shifts and it kind of like switches lanes back and forth between these really, really entertaining scenes that Paul was cutting and these sort of like deeper, more profound scenes that I was cutting. And it kind of does this really neat thing for a viewer where you're just kind of like, instead of like getting whiplash, you're actually getting, it just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper as you go. And that's how we did it.
And so part of the process then was cutting all the scenes, but then going, how should we stitch these together? So there wasn't like a given, it wasn't decided that my scene would be the fourth scene and it would be 15 minutes in. We put all the scenes together like a jigsaw puzzle afterwards, and we're just looking for the best combination of those scenes.
Yeah, like, so I would say to Paul, like, go cut the best, most amazing scene you can about them, like, sneaking in cinder blocks and building a wall. And he would just disappear, and then he would come back, weeks later or whatever, and be like, here's the scene. And it was, obviously incredible. And I was working on something completely different that had sort of no connection to what he was doing.
I mean, I would never say it was a given that working with a friend was going to be a good thing.
Okay.
And that was probably Like that was an unknown for us at the beginning, right, Jeremy? Like, I mean, we could probably say that now is like, you can see somebody else's work and say, I like what they do and I would like them to do that for me. But it's not until like there's a working together thing that you don't know about yet. And I remember feeling incredibly anxious about sending my first scene to you because I was like, I don't know if I'm hitting the mark or not. But like, yeah, I just think, I mean, honestly, this was like one of the most fun, most like fulfilling experiences working on this film. It was great to work with another editor where Jeremy's ideas would like influence my ideas and vice versa. But also, I mean, I also felt like when I arrived on the project, Jeremy had already done a lot of the sort of creative thinking through the process. So that allowed me to just enjoy cutting great scenes like that. As much as I sort of figured out the beats within that scene, I knew that like they were going to be fit into a whole that was going to be already thought through and satisfying in some way. I mean, you know, the parts of the ending we were still sort of figuring out as we went, but we kind of had a sense of where we were going. But I mean, also just dealing with like subject matter that like had me thinking at the end of the day. Like I was alternating this and another project at the same time. And, you know, it was a project that I was actually creatively directing myself. And I was worried that this project was going to lose way to that because I'd always be more interested in my own projects. And I actually found myself stealing time from that project for this just because I felt so good working on it every day.
Yeah, you know, most editors are not filmmakers, but both of you guys are filmmakers and editors, and I feel like that's kind of
and podcasters.
But as somebody who watches a lot of this stuff, and again, somebody who spent a lot of time with you guys and appreciates your work equally, I love the fact that you wear the two hats. It's interesting to see you guys work together, and it's interesting seeing the final product of putting all those skills together.
Yeah, I mean, I also had, you know, I wasn't coming to Paul cold. Like I saw Blind Ambition, which was this documentary about the Zimbabwe wine tasting team.
I remember you gave feedback at that private screening about, and you were very simple in your comment. You said the film is too long.
And I got him back for that with this one by cutting a long film.
The film is too long. Yeah, it was like 145 or so. But it, you know, I remember just being like, wow, Paul really knows how to edit, you know?
Yeah.
And so, and I think that the thing that really struck when I watched it was the range of his editing was that he was able to do like, oh, here's the scene that's like really funny. Here's the scene that's really tense. Here's the scene that's playful. Here's the scene that's tongue in cheek. Like he was just able to do like all these different tones. Lots of editors can be like, oh, I'm good at, you know, one sort of tone. But I think when I saw that documentary, I was like, wow, Paul could hit all these different, he's using every muscle and like hitting every single texture. And that is what gave me like a lot of confidence working with him. So I could say to Paul, okay, this scene, let's make this as an action movie. This scene needs to be funny. This scene needs to be like Ocean's 11. And I think that was really helpful for me. And also the funny, I mean, you know, this movie's funny. And I think that was something we really went for. And I felt good about Paul with that.
How much influence did Mike have? Because I very briefly met Mike, and as I was telling you before we started recording, when I met him, I may have had a picture of margaritas with Chico Leo, and I was just like, dude, you're so cool. The movie's awesome. Anyway, but he was very clear and present and very kind, and you could feel the warmth and humanity just coming off of him. But when you're dealing with a subject who is an artist in his own right and has ideas that are having a profound impact on your own approach to your own craft, how do you draw a line between how much input he should have on the film? Like, did you find a happy, harmonious balance where it's like, we want your contributions, but we don't want you to be sitting in the editing room with us and that sort of thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think of all the documentaries I've done, I don't, you know, it's pretty clear that nobody's going to sit in the editing room, you know, but that I like them to be involved. And this in particular we kind of made a decision that was different from other documentaries, where we wanted the subjects to be kind of involved in the making of the movie. So like, you touched at the top about that we recreated the space, we rebuilt it, and Michael was very involved in that. And that becomes actually part of the movie, that Michael was going to be involved in that. So embracing their participation is really important to me, and kind of having them be involved in the making of the movie is kind of important. I have this idea in my head that a movie should look like a documentary. It should look like as if the subject made the movie about themselves.
Cool. I like that. Yeah.
So that was sort of something. So I would often reach out to Michael. I would show him stuff. I would say, sometimes I was like kind of showing him the fun stuff. So a lot of it was like, hey, here's, the stuff that Paul was cutting. And I'd be like, here's a really fun stuff. Check it out. But that was it, just kind of balancing opinions is always sort of part of the process as well, So it was totally fine. Great He's a great guy.
Well, as far as your other collaborators concerned, one of your producers is the artist formerly known as Lex Luthor, with whom you'd worked before on The World Before Your Feet. What's it like working with Jesse Eisenberg? He's obviously been in the news lately. Kieran Culkin won an Oscar for his film A Real Pain. It seems like you have developed a cool rapport with Jesse Eisenberg.
Yeah. Jesse's a friend, and he sort of, he loves working on this is the second movie of mine that he's been a producer on, and he just kind of loves it. And he has no reason to, he's not really getting anything out of it. He just loves sort of I think he realizes that like, it's really hard to make stuff, and it's really hard to kind of like get stuff out. And he understands that like he could help just by being the person who he is to help somebody. And he just does it. And he's been, on The World Before Your Feet, he did like 30 Q&As with us, which was crazy when you think about it. Just so crazy. For this one, he's been like, making a ton of phone calls to 1 million people. He's going to be at Q&As. He's going on Fallon. He's going to be talking about it. He was at South by with us, and he was very much like sort of side by side with us on it. So he's just always been really supportive, and really, he's so not like movie star guy. He's like a weird, quirky friend of mine that's not very different from some of the subjects that I make.
He comes from this world, being in the Squid and the Whale back in the early days when he was working with Noah Baumbach, and I feel like he's never lost his indie roots, even when he's doing big, giant blockbuster movies and that sort of thing.
I think that Eisenberg is like, I've enjoyed his work since forever. When he pivoted to doing playwriting, and he was starting to do stuff uptown with Manhattan Theater Club, I think MTC. Yeah, the fact that he's from New York. His sister even came to one of our house. We didn't realize that his sister was our friend of a friend, so she was in our house 15 years ago or whatever. They're really, for me, it's like it's nice to know that the soul of New York filmmaking is in the hands of a place like that, a guy like that he has swelled to expand to sort of become someone who's quietly a great manager, a great artist, a great source of inspiration, somebody who has a vision and a sort of searchlight for interesting stories. And the fact that A Fucking Real Pain was so good, and that it had this trajectory, and he called the shot and got an Oscar for his good buddy Kieran Culkin is wonderful. And that's why seeing his name on this, I saw him at the quad screening. Matt was there.
Yeah.
Jesse was there. It was great. It's like, I'm so heartened that this man has grown up. He's middle-aged, just like the rest of us. He's in his 40s.
He still looks the same as he did when he was a teenager.
He still looks the same. Yeah, but he's got 2 kids. He's like settled into. It's just like, this is a really comfortable place for him to be. And his name shows up on something. It says that there's a good imprimatur quality. That's why I'm just thrilled that you're hooked up with him. It's a really great development.
Yeah. Paul, how was he at South by? Like hanging out with Jesse at South by?
He was intense. But intense. I had no idea what kind of conversations I would have with him, and the first time I started talking to him was like during the Q&As at South by Southwest. So like questions are going on, and here I am meeting Jesse for the first time, and he just seemed really interested in like the deep technical stuff of the film. Like we had to do some up-resing of the old footage in this, and he was very curious about that and the process of that and things. So that was quite an interesting moment for me.
Nice.
Being
Actually,
incredibly
Paul,
jet-lagged at the time as well.
That is a question, Paul. My top note on my docket here was all about, I assume, because in the past we've talked, I consulted a couple months with you about reviving and giving life to old footage. You did use Topaz or some other sort of, you expanded this to essentially make a 4K image out of it. Maybe that's a technical jerk-off thing, but for me, I think that in terms of the confirmation issue of using old footage and the way that it used to just get, you would have to suck it up and blow it up and that kind of thing. It's like, this changes the game. I'm curious, are you happy with the AI generated up-resing? What was this experience
Can I
like
answer
for you?
this one first, Jeremy?
Go for it.
I found I intermittently check out reviews on this film on Letterboxd, and somebody made a review that was something like, "This is a great documentary, but I'm so disappointed that they used, the latest AI garbage technology to up-res the footage." And all I could think was, you don't know how it looked before we added that. You would not.
I saw that review. I read it.
Yeah, right. You would not be able to sit there and watch this in a cinema had we have not used it. So I would say what you were viewing is like much more watchable than what we were actually working with.
It was so bad that, I remember Paul and I was having conversations like, is it possible we can't release this movie?
Yeah.
That we cannot, that as good as we're putting so much work into this and it's coming along great, but it's possible it will never be able to be exhibited because it was such bad quality. You have to realize that it's 320 by 240, 10 frames a second, sometimes 8 frames a second.
Yeah.
Also compressed at like an AVI format.
I mean, this was before iPhones.
Yeah.
This camera was before iPhones. So this was your only means of shooting something like this.
It's
back
the
then.
BlackBerry era.
Yeah, it was a stills camera that happened to do video, and it was the worst possible video quality they could fit on a camera like that.
It's I think the up-res, it adds frames, it smooths it out.
Yeah.
For me, it's completely mesmerizing, knowing full well it's like, this is not what this footage looks like, and yet you somehow you got away with the money from the bank. It looks really fucking good.
Nice. Yeah, I had gone to these guys that work for Criterion, and I went to them and I was like, okay, we have the worst looking footage in the world. How do we up-res it? And they threw all these like hardware solutions and boxes and all kinds of like crazy up-resing, mostly hardware. And it was pretty good. But then we tried what's essentially a $300 program, which is Topaz.
Yeah.
And it was better. So we mostly were living with Topaz. And, we had to, it was a long time. It took a long time. It was like the rendering took forever. It was so much material to up-res. And, but you watch it now on screen and it looks great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it projected at the IFC Center, and it looked absolutely fantastic. But Bill, I promised Jeremy ahead of time there'd be some hard-hitting journalism in this video, some fastball questions. So the floor is yours. What fastball do you have in your back pocket that you want to hurl at either of these two gentlemen to see if they can?
This is all. I'm pugil sticks covered in cotton. I got nothing hard. You're the one that you're gonna have to screw to.
I got nothing hard. It's gonna be the title of this video.
I'm just filled with praise and bonhomie for my friends here. I don't want to scorch them at all.
No, I agree. It's watching people that you know independently, that you've recorded with independently and hung out with independently, seeing them work together and make something amazing. It's an incredibly satisfying, rewarding experience. Just as a movie lover, especially since in recent memory, I've been watching a lot of turkeys. And this past week, I had to watch the latest movie by Bong Joon-ho, which kind of sucked. And then I saw the latest Russo Brothers movie, which really sucked. But when I watched Secret Mall Apartment, I was like, a plant being watered. I was like, yes,
all right,
movie that I can actually enjoy, and I know the people who made it. So along those lines, fastball question for Paul. In a previous life, you were the host of a podcast called Screen Psychics.
Yeah.
Can I get you to come back on YouTube at some point for a special episode of Screen Psychics where we make a prediction ahead of a terrible movie, see it, and do a breakdown because
should.
I miss your breakdowns because nobody knows how to shit on a movie from a great height quite like Paul Murphy, and I need that I need that commentary in my life.
Well, we did do a special on the movies we walked out on, right?
The Unwatchables.
Yeah, the Unwatchables. hopefully this film is not included in that
What was
category.
one of the Unwatchables?
Well, to make the list, it had to be a movie that you walked out of in the theater, and I've got a few new Unwatchables that I've added to the mix. When I saw Timothée Chalamet in Wonka, I made it through the opening credits, but I didn't actually see the movie. I left as the credits were drawn to a close. So that is a fresh Unwatchable. But the moment he started singing, I was like,
I'm out.
We're done here.
Jamie, didn't you walk out of the Jennifer Lawrence booby movie like 2 years ago?
What's it called? Not Quite Hard or something like
No Hard Feelings?
No Hard Feelings.
Yeah.
I saw the special scene, but the movie was so soft and fuzzy and had such a clear-cut, nauseating sense of purpose to it. I was like, this is not a scandalous sex comedy. This is like a warm and fuzzy feel-good movie masquerading as a sex comedy. So I also walked out of No Hard Feelings.
Wow. I have not walked out of a movie in quite a while, I would say. Maybe since we did that episode. I've had a good run. I see most of my movies at the movies now, and I've had a pretty good run. Like the last 2 or 3 years, I think.
We got to break that streak. There's so many strong contenders this summer.
But you see, your thumbnails help me because I saw your thumbnail for the Electric State today. I think you got like a knife to your throat.
I saw that too.
And I was like, all right, I'm just going to stay away from that.
Yes.
Yeah. It'll deprive you of any sense of purpose or hope for life if you watch the Electric State. All right, well then, Jeremy, let me throw a fastball to you then. I know you are a not so closeted giant film freak. I've done a lot of podcasts with you where we tackle an entire year of filmmaking and like the hundreds of movies released therein. But now obviously you're cranking out movies left and right. And I don't want to back you into a corner, but in between all your time making movies, which filmmakers that are active today that are obviously your peers and you don't want to speak ill of, but who are the filmmakers out there right now that still give you that joy of being a cinephile, that joy of discovery, whether they're documentary filmmakers or, or narrative filmmakers?
Well, I got very into Korean films because I'm making my new movies set in Korea, my new documentary, which is kind of like crazy. So yeah, I went from doing Secret Mall Apartment to now making a documentary that's set in Korea. And I go back and forth to Korea all the time. Which is totally bonkers. It's about a school in South Korea that has 20 students, and all 20 students are North Korean defectors.
Wow. I've been to the DMZ back in 2007, and I've looked across the gap between the two countries, and it's an intimidating sight.
Yeah, so I've now filmed at the DMZ like several times. So like for the past year, so I went out. So I've been like working with Korean producers, and so they were able to tell that like I was like a real film geek, but that they also noticed that like my knowledge of Korean cinema was not lacking. What it should be, especially given like the explosion of incredible Korean movies.
Yeah, the last 20 years has been a real golden age.
Yeah. So I then spent literally in the last 2 years, I think I've only watched documentaries in Korean movies. So I, probably, Chan-wook Park is probably where I'm coming out on, as how great he is. And
I was there for the midnight screening at Sundance when he introduced the movie to a very drunken, rowdy crowd. And I remember the presenter was like, for Old Boy back in 2003 or 4. But I remember the announcer, when he saw how rowdy we were, was like, this is the perfect crowd for this movie. But yeah, I never quite know if it's Chan-wook Park or Park Chan-wook, but in the early 2000s he was Park Chan-wook, and now he's
Chan-wook. But that's just a Korean thing. It's Park Chan-wook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously Handmaiden was incredible. What was the one that came out like 2 years ago?
Decision to Leave.
Decision to Leave was outstanding. But yeah, he's my favorite of the South Korean directors.
Yeah. So I sort of made it a mission to kind of like, okay, well, I'm not, I can't let these Korean producers make fun of me that I haven't seen, all the Korean
and a lot of cool genre filmmaking, like horror films and superheroes and stuff, and cool video games like Lies of P and Stellar Blade. So yeah, if you're into genre genre cinema or genre video games, South Korea has definitely got a lot of
You got guys like Lee Chang-dong, who's just an incredible fucking director. I think Burning was one of the best movies.
Burning's
of the last 5
great,
years.
and I have a friend that's making a documentary now on the main actor in Burning, Yoo Ah-in, who ran into like all kinds of problems in Korea because he got busted doing drugs and also like a sex crime and wild shit coming out there. But yeah, Burning's great. So that's been mostly my watching, that and documentaries.
All right, so one final question about your process. This film kind of hits you like an asteroid, but it sounds like you're deep into your next movie. How do you know when a concept is exciting enough and provocative enough and there's enough depth there where you can invest a couple of years of your life where if you're sick, you're tired, or you're tired of your coworkers, where you can still wake up and be like, we're making a fucking movie today. Let's hurl ourselves into it. Yeah. But I remember like at one point I asked you years ago, I was like, how weird would I have to get before you'd make a short film about me? And you're like, you're not even near weird enough.
So Chico Leo, on the other hand,
definitely deserves a short film. And if you make it, I will hold a boom until my arm falls off just to be there for that documentary.
I want to make a short documentary on Chico Leo in his house. So that's.
I want to see you and Jesse Eisenberg inside his house, specking out the next movie.
Yes,
yeah. And we have to put Chico in jail temporarily so he won't clean up ahead of your arrival.
Right, exactly.
We want it as is.
But what is it that where I'll say like
what's the aha moment where the light bulb goes off and it's like I found the next movie?
Yeah, part of it is also just like how can I get it made? That's also a really underrated part of this question, which is can I get it financed? Can I get it made? There's lots of interesting stories and subjects that like might be hard to raise the money on. So it also needs to have that like commercial aspect, that marketability as well. But I think it's one of those things where it's like not much different from what we're doing now. Like if I'm chatting with buds and we're just all hanging out and I'm like, you got to hear this story or listen to this insanity. And I just could tell like, you're just like, what? That sounds crazy. Then I know we're onto something. So it's kind of that. It's very anecdotal. It's very first person. I don't, that's really all I could try to figure out. And I try to find subjects that are always excite me and that keep me excited. Yeah, but I don't know. It's like one of those, it when you see it kind of things.
Fantastic. Well, Paul Murphy, what do you have on deck as a filmmaker, editor, podcaster, just all around jack of all trades in the movie biz?
Yeah, I'm working on a documentary right now. It's quite a long process at the moment. I've been on it for 9 months. I had a podcast out 6 months ago that I did with Sony, which was called, what was it called? The Conspiracy Tapes, which was about the origins of the Illuminati myth in America during the 70s. But yeah,
another great easy work experience for you, Paul. Just smooth as silk, that one.
Yeah, well, that was the two-hander that I did with Secret Mall Apartment. And Secret Mall Apartment was like a joy, and my heart would explode every day working on it. And then I would deal with these really depressing, dark people who, were horrible, horrible people and, had done all sorts of sex crimes and things like that. This was like a very nice counterbalance to that. But I'm just keeping on doing my stuff.
Fantastic. Well, Bill, what are you working on? And do you have any final questions for these two fine gentlemen?
I am not working on a goddamn thing. I don't really have a question so much as I guess it is. Most of my bullshit tonight has been comments, which I apologize for that. But I'm still kind of amazed, Jeremy. I think we're close to the same age. I'm hitting 50 in a couple of months, and there's a thing about watching these, since I became friends with you and since I started watching these movies, somehow you are unlocking it's not just the way you make movies, it's seeing these 3 movies in a sequence, or the 4 movies all told. Somehow you're kind of clarifying the business of being a filmmaker, where these movies get bigger and they get more attention from people. They seem to accrue a sense of direction and momentum, and a lot of people make good movies, but there isn't a logic behind them, and they don't add up to something when you look at them together. I don't know what your secret is. If you're rubbing oil will lay on your face, if somehow you're taking HGH or what it is, but it's like you've kind of stumbled on a little theorem about how to be a better filmmaker the older you get, where it just makes more sense. The movies you're doing are building upon the movie beforehand to become more whole, more commercial, more saleable, something about it without giving up anything in terms of credibility. Or I don't know how you do that, but I appreciate that you are doing it.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to is that, like, you know, passion, stick-to-itiveness, and just kind of, you know, resolve to kind of keep doing it. I try to keep these films inexpensive so that they're easy to invest in. They're easy to make their money back. I tend to work with really great people. I work with them, the same people, over and over again, usually. It gives me a lot of autonomy. There's a trade-off, though. You know, I don't really, so far, I haven't really been like, oh, I'm going to get in business and do something for Netflix. I don't really do that, you know, and it has given me this great autonomy to, like, make my movies my way and bring on the people that I want to work with. But it also, you know, there's a trade-off. When you work with Netflix, it's just so amplified. So I've decided that that I want to be on the other side. I want to be able to make, you know, these really interesting movies and just keep doing it. And it's not so much about trying to get at the most eyeballs all the time. You know.
Well, I have a prediction that sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll make a Vince or Mr. McMahon style series for Netflix, and it'll blow people's goddamn minds. But just as a way of wrapping things up,
yeah,
I'm going to have everybody's links down in the video description below. But just everybody, if they could verbally say where you can be found. And yeah, if you're looking for information about upcoming screenings of Secret Mall Apartment, secretmallapartment.com. And you can put in your zip code and look for tickets and figure out when a screening is coming to you. But as Jeremy said, it's coming to about 100 cities. But Jeremy, we'll start with you. Social media, whatever you want to plug, promote, now's the time to.
Yeah, I mean, just, you know, I'd love people to see this movie. It's, you know, we put so much behind it and we love it and it's so interesting. And I think it speaks to all. I also think it speaks, you know, James, to your audience. You know, it's very, you know, it's cinematic, but it's also kind of, you know, it's riffing on cinema history, even though it's a doc. It's kind of doing a lot of different styles, and, you know, it's not. It's very much a movie for people who maybe don't even see that many documentaries. You know, I often would compare it to movies like Ferris Bueller's Day Off before I would compare it to another documentary. So I'd love your audience to see it. You know, you could go to secretmallapartment.com. You could find theaters. Like I said, it's going to be in New York. It's going to be in all over New England, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire. But we should also be in Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, you know, and on and on. A lot of Alamo draft houses too. So yeah, I'd love, you know, people to check it out, and then they could, you know, write in the comments what they thought, or reach out to me, or if I'm at a screening doing Q&A, come up and say hello. Which, by the way, James, people at other movies of mine have come up to me.
The New Art screening where Becky Deanna was in attendance.
Yeah.
One of her friends had heard about the movie on Wrong Reel and was like, hey, I heard about it on the podcast. And
people have come up to me at screenings and been like, I've heard you on Wrong Reel.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
Yeah. Well, the days of Wrong Reel in pure audio format have sadly drawn to a close, but this is anytime I'm with the Wrong Reel regulars from back in the day, it is an episode of Wrong Reel, which is why we include the video intro and outro cut together by Bill Scurry.
Nice.
Good work, Bill.
Nice.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Paul,
that's my pitch.
Fantastic. Well, Paul, where can people find you if they want to follow up with you on? At one point, you had that awesome YouTube channel about how to edit. I don't know if you're still maintaining.
Yeah, I still got that. So if you want to see me in this exact same lighting, but talking about the technicalities of editing, that's the Premiere Pro. So talking about editing with Premiere Pro on YouTube. And everything else like work-wise and stuff, paul-murphy.net.
Very nice. Mr. Scurry.
At Bill Scurry or at William Scurry, some combination thereof on all the social medias. I have a podcast called I Don't Get It That's a weekly concern. Comes out in a couple of hours on the East Coast. Middle-aged people looking at weird topics. This week we're talking about Waymo, the robo-taxi service rolling out in California at the moment. But yeah, on the socials I'm out there. I'm a very easy person to find. Don't get me confused with the Australian wedding officiant. That is not me. I am currently in Amsterdam, originally from New York. So different guy.
Fantastic. Well, we hope y'all have enjoyed this episode. And as I said before, even if you feel like your mind is pretty made up about certain ideas about art, this movie might rattle your cage and force you to look at something from us. Won't force you, but encourage you to look at things from a different point of view. And so there's hope for all of us in terms of remaining somewhat broad-minded in our lives moving forward. And I hope that people will discover the movie. And I hope that this movie will be taking home a statue for Best Documentary Feature in 2026. But I can't thank all of you enough for coming on the show and hanging out. I look forward to the day where the four of us can be in the same room again, tilting back a few glasses of single malt. But remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all the good stuff. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.
Ain't like it used to be, but it'll do.
You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.